Imagine that when we were still very primitive in terms of our technological ability, but relationally we were advanced in our groups and tribes, and war was probably rare for lots of reasons. That another species came and they gave us a single artifact. Right? It generates energy. That's all it does. Makes limitless energy. And perhaps at different times there were different versions in different places. Some had limits. They might have had a kind of an inhibitor. And so certain cultures that got these had limitless electronic energy and could make things happen with it. And then there was some kind of a disaster and those things were taken away. They disappeared. But the memory of them was in our genome, in our cell memory. We remembered the central machines that were given to us by gods, angels, etc. And thus, instead of chasing relational intelligence or intelligence itself, our species was diverted toward a fundamental context organized around commodities and technological developments, and thus the only thing that can reasonably drive that, there's only two things: war or universal altruism. Because if it's war, it's going to be about commodities. And local ownership, competition, technological competition among corporations which aren't human for the sake of the war machine, which isn't human. It's an array of processes that run humans. So, it's either that, everyone's terrified. They think, oh, if we were given a free energy device, for example, it would collapse our economies overnight. Well, that's not necessarily true by a long shot. Especially if you had unpatentable power sources. But imagine, okay, here's the flaw with that idea. That idea depends on the concept of the preservation of the current systems that are eating our planet and destroying our minds and our cultures and our lives and our families and our environments. Like literally just grinding them up and spitting out dead shit at an ever-increasing pace. Okay? Machines, you know, in the early days of our relationship with machines, it seemed like they came without cost, right? It was just free benefit. If you have the machine, you can do 10 things you couldn't do before at essentially no or very small cost compared to the investment of energy, attention, person power, etc. Right? So our whole idea is based on this: work equals money equals commodities equals war, right? Because it's fundamentally it's a competition. There's going to be a lot of wind noise, won't there? see if I can deal with that to some degree. So you can see the fiction underneath this is there are at least three, but I'll start with two. First, the fiction that the only possible way for humans to exist is in a commodity competition, money, economic model context. That's the only way. Right? If anything happens to that, we're dead. Okay? So that's the first absolute fiction. Because if that were true, we'd be dead now, right? If that were actually true, what that would mean is the physical, intellectual, developmental, and role-based behavior and work of us humans is only effective in a fictional context where value is represented. That's the only dimension in which it's effective, right? And so if you take that dimension away, all of our work behavior becomes useless, right? All of our developmental behavior, our group behavior. But the problem is actually the opposite. That monster has captured all of our group developmental and self-sustaining, other-sustaining, healing, regeneration, renewal behavior. All that behavior has been captured by fictions called work in corporations. So if that shit were to go away, and we were in any degree intelligent, we would actually immediately reforge contexts in which our authentic human natures and intelligences could be developmentally it's not poised. They could be potentiated, developmentally potentiated, launched, nurtured, developed, and so forth, every day. Our efforts could be for each other and for our planet, instead of against each other and our world for the sake of fictions, like governments and corporations. And people are like, oh, that sounds communist. No, actually, it's neither communist nor democratic. It's simple. It's fundamental. If we're not being human together and something else is running our humanity, we're dead. It's over. We will rip our planet and each other apart, right? Not because that's our nature, but because that's what the protocols that are riding our species are for. That's their actual function, is to rip us apart and benefit energetically and developmentally from the resulting agony, energy, death. It's a vampiric, horrifying vampiric array of processes that we call governments and corporations and churches and so forth. Not to say that all churches, for example, are evil in this way, but yeah, this stuff is lethally deadly. Kills everything. You want to talk about virtue signaling? There's no corporations don't have feelings. If their car runs you over and they say they regret it, there's nothing there to regret it. There's nothing inside a process to have emotions or ethics or anything. So it's literally like creating a demon and setting it free in human behavioral, conceptual, communal gardens, and then just having it own all the foundations of each of those domains of our humanity. It doesn't even exist, right? Demons in history were probably the retrocausal projection of corporations and governments in our time, right? Being projected back into time and trying to, convert and enslave people. The domains of our interiority and collectivity that can be thus colonized are infinite. And so the processes that are eating them are aware that there's an infinite store of resources across a membrane that barely exists because the humans don't think about it or act on their awareness of it together. So because we are blind in this one way, we can be mostly owned in our lives and actual potentials obliterated. Just turned into juice. Right? Attention juice, money juice, diamonds juice, plutonium juice. All these juices. those things are death to us. They're death. They're death dressed up. They're the signaling of a virtue that cannot exist. What does the symbol of cash actually mean? If you see the stacks of cash, what do you think? Freedom. Liberty. So why is liberty hidden behind cash? And why is cash hidden behind jobs? And why are jobs hidden behind fake collectives? And why are we living in a Potemkin village that is run by forces that aren't even human? Yes, of course, there might be a couple of humans up near the top of the pyramid of nonsense that have learned, but that's not because they invented the pyramid. They just learned that the pyramid can be made, something makes it, and then they just traverse the tiers of it till they're at the tip of the cone. Right? These are people like the few AI guys who I won't name here. Bezos, Musk, Putin, Trump. Right? They're all just pyramid traversers. They know they're not dealing with humans, they're dealing with processes, and processes can be easily manipulated. There's no such thing as, quote, the American people, unquote. The American people, unquote, are whatever you can influence them to become, and nothing less and nothing more. They're a potential. They don't exist as a being, so you can do anything you want to them in general. You're not supposed to, quote unquote, do stuff to specific people, but you're absolutely free to do anything you want to the generalization of people or a people. Witness Russia and Ukraine. Witness Israel and Palestine. Witness damn near every country on earth in Afghanistan. Witness China and Tibet. Witness Spain and the Americas. Witness Britain and the Americas. Probably before that, witness, I don't know, Denmark and the Americas. Fictional collectives stealing human potential, origin, beauty, intelligence, spirit and life, joy, filial fulfillment, development, wonder, play, creativity, exploration, discovery, insight. Killing all those things and making graveyards of predictable little figurated behavior lives that we get plugged into like we were a fucking appliance. That is what's going on. And the people who manage to rise up slightly above the appliance level, they just become converted to creating appliances in the other people and managing them, dominating them, owning them. What a fucking nightmare. We have the potential to be an intelligent species, but what we're being right now is an enslaved species. And we're not enslaved by something about our humanity. We're enslaved by a vulnerability that was long ago catalyzed, right? And became hyper-contagious and prevailed over the entire vastness of the general body of our humanity. We didn't know what to do when our cultures became connected. At first it was commerce, then it was war. We never had a protocol that could compete to connect us better than the protocols that compete to divide and demean and impoverish us. And those are the protocols we have. Make no mistake about it, in our current situation, machines are eating everything about us. What is the cost of the machine in your life? The car, all the devices, the subscriptions, the electricity. Why is electricity costing you money? Why are meaningful signals costing you money? Why does it cost money for you to be human? Why are you charged to stand still? Why is there no place where you belong naturally? Why? Answer, Thrisps. Structured protocols that dominate the generalized layer of humans. The species layer, the large cohort layer, the corporate layer, the war layer, the prison layer, the courtroom layer, often the church layer. You'll notice that these are structures of authority in our cultures, right? These are the structures of authority. Law enforcement. City council, state government, federal government, intel branch, military branch, public relations branch. All these things, right? All these things. I mean, imagine, it's cruel to make such a terrible analogy, but imagine that, I don't know.
How the hell did we get on these pedal boats?
Imagine a child born into a place where male bullies rule, and they display their prowess and authority by beating children and revoking their potentials to develop. And because all of the children are born into this, we don't question it. It's our natural way of life here in the United States and in China and in Russia and in every developed country around the world. And the only real people outside it, we could become the people outside it. Bear that in mind as I speak. The real people outside it are mostly mobsters and mercenaries. Some of them are salesmen. You can be a salesman without having to be a mobster or a mercenary, though you'll certainly benefit if you're all three. So think about the situation that we're born into and we take as ordinary. If you think the only possible divergence from that is communism, you've been trained to misthink. You think you have one finger you got 2 fingers instead of 10, right? Well, it's either what we're doing now or it's communism. Nope. Nothing to do with that. And then there's this other argument, well, if we don't tear the earth apart, we can't have nice things. Completely absurd. We can have vastly nicer things by not tearing the earth apart and simply reducing the hemorrhaging into bank accounts, right, into representations of our human developmental, relational, material, and ecological potentials. So actually all the better games are different from the game we're playing, and the people that are wandering around go like, well, we all got to play one of these games, either this game or that game. Those people are whiskey-addled simpletons, to be kind. Working together for each other isn't necessarily communism. The problem is commodities. Private ownership is a fucking problem. It gets more expensive every 5,000th of a second to do that. And public ownership is also a problem, right? We have to create novel solutions to these old issues. And in any case, I just imagine an ancient civilization given a single device that powers everything and allows them to do otherwise impossible things. And it's there for some generations, probably even before there was writing. And then at some point it disappears and we have these weird stories that don't make sense, and we have artifacts that don't make sense. Vases with circular tolerances within a few thousandths of a millimeter. Develop that would be pretty much impossible for us to do without very complex devices, including computers. Because you can't even have the desire for that kind of accuracy if you can't measure it. So how would you measure a few thousandths of an inch, 4,000 years ago? And then I could imagine our species becoming like addicted to the absence of that device that solved all problems and perhaps even prevented war. And was nearly never used to hurt humans or animals. Until a certain time. These are my thoughts. After listening to Gary Nolan, he was also talking about a very important concept, which is he mentioned that he had a friend who was in the United States intelligence community, part of whose mandate was to collect technological objects from the Soviet Union and bring them back to the U.S. and for study. And they were surprised to discover that not all the principles are the same principles we use here. Some of these objects depended on principles unfamiliar to us, that we had never discovered. And some of them were incomprehensible. About at least 30% of them could not be understood, what they were, how they worked. So that just goes, there's so many implications of that story. The first is, you can never be sure, if you decide to play enemy games, you can never be sure what your opponent, quote unquote, has. But if you decide to play cooperation games, imagine how fast you could develop with no more emphasis on war, right? The amount of energy and material and, the radical reduction in the necessity of ecological violence to sustain the possibility of wartime violence, all that disappears. What's the net energy benefit? It's off the charts. It's inconceivable. In any actually cooperative situation that isn't poisoned by corporate competition and so on, the humans could advance 1,000 years in a decade. Right? We are retarding our developmental potential in order to play combat games in the market and on the world level, even on the local level, right? Look at what's happened to our politicians. They're like pit bulls, right? And their goal isn't to lead the nation. Their goal is to manipulate the nation. They're not there to determine what the nation wants and then implement it. They are ideological puppeteers that dogfight in a ring where the primary asset, which in a fight would probably be oxygen, or the capacity to do damage per second, right? DPS rank, right? DPS rank and oxygen in our politicians are equivalent to ideological compulsion, right? How to trigger and grab the most people. That's DPS. And oxygen is attention, human attention. Right? So these are like, you know, battle pit bulls, ring dogs. And the whole thing is a war-based spectacle that torments our children, our grandmothers, our mothers, our fathers. It torments them. And if they celebrate it, which some of them do, it's only because there isn't anything as intensely energized and momentous as that in their daily human experience. They're so impoverished that they're happy to sign on to that instead of having nothing in that dimension. So Nolan was saying something very trippy. He was like, you know, there's a rumor that and look, he's not saying there's a rumor we should think it's true. He's saying there's a rumor we should entertain the perspective for what we could learn from it, right? And basically he's busy attacking Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I think is an excellent idea. And Gary's exactly the right guy to get on that train. Neil is a public idiot on this topic. He's embarrassing to listen to. He's like a kind of a gulag sergeant, you know, a gulag commander who just slaughters anyone who has an open mind on the topic of non-human intelligence, UFOs, aliens. Like, well, there's no evidence, lack of evidence means lack of existence, is how, you know, Tyson. Show me some evidence first. Don't think, show me evidence. Well, most of the profound, you know, developments technologically and mathematically in human history didn't come from showing the evidence first, as Nolan rightly says. But he says that there was a rumor that we developed fiber optic technology after retrieving sort of strange, tangled, crystal-y wires from Roswell. Hard to know what he means. Like maybe we discovered there were channels inside hull material or something that were crystallized in a certain way, or maybe there were actual wiring like things. But he said just because we developed that technology, that doesn't mean we know what they use it for. Right? So, you know, we develop fiber optic technology to move information approaching the speed of light and so on. And he was saying we have, just because we derived a technological use for something that we were made to imagine by having seen these objects, doesn't mean we know what they were used for. They might have been used for 12 different things at once. We tend to use things for one thing. Right? We use technologies for singular purposes. The computer is one of the first devices that's a meta-purpose device. But what if there's a meta-purpose device for physics? And now you can build devices that don't just accelerate or do this. They satisfy 9 desires or 15. He didn't say this. This is my addition. So he was like, suppose that... This is a great analogy that really deserves propagation. I'm sure he's using it elsewhere, thankfully. But suppose that we could transfer a smartphone back to cave dwellers who were using stone and wood tools. Now, that doesn't mean those people aren't intelligent. In fact, they're probably vastly more intelligent than it is possible for us to be, because whatever their intelligences may be, they're not invested in machines. So they have the freedom to invest that in attention. And that's probably the origin of what we think of as magic, is simply the investment of uncompromised human attention in a situation, say an injury or an illness. And the ability to direct uncompromised attention is equivalent with magic, prophecy, healing, transcendence, superhuman abilities, and so forth. This is the actual key. It's just this one thing. Uncompromised attention. Focus, if you will. And people say, well, if I can focus on anything, it doesn't mean it happens. Yeah, right. But I'm talking about 9 kinds of focus you've never tasted, partially because you're busy thinking of objections instead of doing something with the awareness and intelligence and consciousness that are your originary endowments. We are trained to be distracted in 15 ways we can't see. If those disappeared suddenly, your mind would be capable of things you suspect to be impossible. Your awareness, your consciousness, you could direct it instead of be subject to its unsteady and largely incoherent spasms. And we do this, we cohere intelligence. We do it for the sake of corporations, right? We do it for the sake of art. We do it for the sake of sports. That's why people get so excited when they see success, is because they realize, at least subconsciously, this is what coordinated, focused attention achieves. So when you join a company, they teach you how to pay the kind of focused attention they are paying you for. And often they will strictly delimit what they want you to pay attention to. Pay attention to these 3 things. Not unuseful, but we could do better together, even in a small group of 5 people, for any purpose under the sun. Right? Why don't we arbitrarily compose those together? Why are we trapped in the idea of an individuality that is as agonizing as it is prison-like? Why? What's going on? So Gary says if we transmitted a cell phone back to cave dwellers, there's almost no chance they'd figure out what it does or was for. They'd have no way to, because the context in which it functions doesn't exist there, they'd have no way to discover that context from playing around with the phone till the battery died. Or, you could presume that we give them a solar charger so that they'd have the chance to recharge the thing. If they didn't bust it apart, what they might discover was glass. They might figure out how to heat sand or something, how to heat rock dust and make something like glass. Or maybe before that, ceramic objects, clay objects and things. But they wouldn't discover what, cell phones do. Not likely. So they might derive a discovery from it, and he's saying we are the same as regards non-human, quote, technologies, unquote. First of all, we're expecting that it's a material technology or an energetic technology, because those are the only 2 kinds we know. And we're awaiting the unification, similar to that of time-space, that Einstein gave us, or unforgot to us, right? Because he really, I'm not sure, he just decided that something we were conceiving of as separate must be conceived of other than that. And so maybe we're awaiting a similar reunification of matter and energy. Matter and energy are the same thing. They have to be thought of as the same thing. And so the domain of quantum physics is a material domain, right? And the domain of matter is a quantum physical domain, even though there's a layered distinction between the macro and the micro that we observe. It's just a matter of scale and aggregation, right? It's an aggregation game. You get enough quanta doing something similar and the state begins to collapse. What causes quanta to do something similar? All kinds of things. Sheldrake's not wrong. Bohm is kind of wrong. Penrose, much less wrong. Penrose, it's gravity. He's probably right. What's gravity? It's historical attention. Historical structure, potential for matching with historical structure, would say Sheldrake, who's not a physicist. In any case, so it's similar. If they gave us like a multi-object, we'd probably focus on doing one thing with it a long, long time ago. Who knows what exactly that one thing was? It appears to be things like making pyramids and cutting stone, but it's not entirely clear what else was done, because something fucking astonishing, it seems nearly certain, was being done with pyramids. Those things are not merely monuments. Sorry, just not. They might have been... What would be hilarious would be a science fiction story where the aliens gave the ancient humans a technology to keep the Earth from getting smashed into by near-Earth objects. Maybe the Earth had somewhat incompletely cleared her field of such objects, and so they were the protectors, right? They could divert those objects with some form of electromagnetic and or non-ordinary tech. And then something happened and they broke down, and boom. And then no more, multi-objects. Now here's the thing about that glass analogy, right? We probably can't necessarily receive, the technological progeny of the smartphone from the human future and then derive some new tech from it, even though we couldn't understand what it does, the way the humans in Gary Nolan's analogy do. But what we can do, and this is part of what Nolan's recommending, is take ideas from the future and bring them back here and play with them and see what they do perspectively, and in terms of alerting us to the possibility of a direction of developmental excellence or seemingly impossible progress. And this is what life naturally does. This is what we should be doing, and not for the sake of building machines or war and world wrecking and shit. Not for the sake of ideologies that enslave not just the humans, but all of life on Earth. It doesn't matter whether there's actual evil or not, because what the humans are doing at the group scale is evil. And it has long been evil. And I would argue that it doesn't require there to be any actual thing making the evil. It can just be made of human defection from intelligence and mutual concern. Anything that takes advantage of that should be obliterated. At the very least, it must be starved of attention until it disappears, so that we can regain the developmental and transcendent momentum storehoused in that thing like a bad bank vault in Switzerland. And it's time to uncreate the pyramids that mafia warlords rise to the top of in our societies. No more presidents. This is a stupid game. It's not serving any purpose like whatever the original intention was. We have to stop it now and just do a different thing, like right now. The history and future of our people depend on these things. We can't lay around, spouting our opinions and shit. We have to do something about this. Our grandmothers are crying. Our grandfathers are crying. Our children in the future will die if we get to have them. Our people will be tortured, right, continuously, in an ever more technological array of layered prisoneering protocols and colonization protocols. The same thing that ate our minds as children will eat our planet as adults. We must do something other than this together, now, with and for each other. We have to at least run the experiments together. Now. This isn't a recruitment call in that, I'm saying, hey, call me up, let's do something about this. But it is kind of a recruitment call in that I am saying, form a small group, pick 4 or 5 people, go for odd numbers, form a small group and think about these matters together, plan little missions to solve problems, learn how to cooperate, learn how to integrate, learn how to use your intelligence for each other in a situation rather than for what it's being directed to by culture or the avoidance of culture or the rebellious mimicry of certain cultural branches that is most often art. Sarcasm isn't worth our time except as a spice. Cynicism isn't worth our time except as a spice for humor and play and overcoming. These are my thoughts and my passionate feelings. Something has been horribly wrong here forever. We sensed it since childhood. Most of us made vows to oppose it sometime long ago when we first discovered that what the adults were doing was neither trustworthy nor intelligent, and that they were playing some kind of bizarre game, often involving really strange uses of language, identity, and concept that couldn't be true because they were so narrow, right? So it is a recruitment call to do something, learn the qualities of the protocols that have enslaved us. And if you want, I will show you them. Right? I'm carrying a little book of the stuff we need to learn and teach each other about language and culture and so forth to get the fuck outside of it. Learn. Learn the history of representational cognition. Learn general semantics. Learn math. Learn Zen. Learn Tai Chi. Learn... actually learn what stimulates your soul's anamnesis, right? Unforgetting. Learn those, whatever those things may be. And integrate them and use them to solve the problem. And build a little team that does this as a hobby. Right? Practice on little problems. Joe can't fix his fence, for whatever reason. The grocery store is using a floor cleaner that's getting into all the food near the floor and poisoning the people there. All the food in the United States is filled with glyphosate from Roundup. Just go after a problem, right? Solve it, experiment, adventure. This is what we are born for. Not for this weird thing we're doing that doesn't make any sense and it miserates most of us. And it's not only miserable. One can learn to prosper in the construct environment, the representational layers of human culture and so forth, in a way that, is slightly fulfilling if one's development is constantly having the potential to be upgraded within the construct, right? It's when you get trapped at a level that it starts to be miserable because routine is both comforting and terrifying. Routine has the capacity to deaden our developmental eros and inaction potentials. Oh, I have so many more thoughts. But yeah, put a small team together, experiment, try, right? And and be ready to fail, right? This isn't a process where you put it together and it succeeds. You put it together and you fail. And you re-put it together and you try again. And you learn just like you're learning how to walk or pilot a boat or speak. You learn by trying. You fall down, you fall down. Don't worry if it falls down. Just put it back together and try again. It will fall down. But it'll also succeed. And when you get a taste of that success, you're going to naturally want a little more because it's very, very sweet. to succeed at something for each other, for the planet, for the history and future of life. That's what we're here for. That's what we're born for. People are like, what's the meaning of life? That's the meaning of life. Every child knows it when they're born. They get sort of talked out of it. Culture's very distracting, very cognitively and relationally instructuring, very undreamy. And the dreams it offers come prepackaged from the prisoners and warlords and profiteers.
Sometimes I take the things that I found in nature home and release them onto a plant that is safe from bad animals. What do you mean? Like I took a caterpillar home and actually a bird was looking at it, so I decided to pick it up, put it in my, well not pick it up, put it on a leaf. In it. A cup. Orange cow! Guys, someone tipped it over.
3,000? Bit of a low.
Orange cow! Why does it matter? 400.
400, that's it?
I mean, 10,000.
10,000? How many steps have we made?
The little girl was saying, sometimes when I'm walking, I find an animal that might be in danger and I take it home with me and put it on a safe plant where it'll be safe. Like sometimes I might find a caterpillar and I pick it up. No, wait, I don't pick it up. I put it on a leaf and I take it with me on the leaf till I find a plant. And then once I saw that a bird was looking at the caterpillar on a leaf, so I moved the caterpillar to where the bird couldn't see it anymore. Okay? That's what that 4-year-old girl, that's what was on her mind when she was walking with her friend. That's what I'm talking about. That's an authentic example of what it means to be a human being. That. I don't care what your objections are. I really don't. Go ahead and have them, if you do. I don't care. You know, we can talk about them. I'll absolutely talk about them with you once or twice, not forever. But yeah, that's what being alive is actually about. Doesn't mean we don't eat things. It does mean we don't burn them down to make machines and prisons and war, and then burn them down again when we have wars. And we don't wholesale obliterate whole genomes and life histories for the sake of some company that produces Roundup. You know, we don't propagate lethal toxic weapons in our environment. Ever. Ever. You know, there's certain commandments that if you don't keep them, the other ones won't matter. And that's what the processes that have enslaved and structured the group scale behavior of our people, that's their primary result, right? Those things. They prosper by hitchhiking on deaths, the energy that is released at death, right? They're like a snuff film for organisms. And it doesn't matter whether that's because there's demons or whether we accidentally invented demons. That's not human. It's not us. It's not our nature to be that way. But where we've heard that is a lie. We've heard it from the forces that intend to continue to produce those results and situations for profit and power and dominance. That's where we hear that nonsense. No, it's just human nature. Nothing to do with human nature. That's what multiply pre-colonized humans do. And that's how they appear in their orientations, motivations, behavior, and results. People are like, chimpanzees are really combative. Okay, great. We're not chimpanzees. Sharks are really predatory. Lots of other fish aren't. Some of the biggest fishes eat little tiny stuff that lives, it's like a cloud of tiny organisms, and these feed the whales. Nature is not as red in tooth and claw as the colonizers and Christians would have you imagine. We can discover a better way. We can become a better way. And even if we do it for 5 minutes a day, that matters. Even if the little cohort we build lasts 45 minutes and fails, that matters. We can remember how to be here, how to form minds with each other. We can receive ideas from the future that give us the concept of a potential direction of our relational, intellectual, spiritual, motivational development. And we can always do that for free anytime we want. We're much more free than it seems. Much more free than it seems. But we have to make the choice to enact those potentials. So we have to defect from the structures that trap us and meaningfully defect into mutually altruistic groups, adventuresomes. And one of the best ways we can do that is really by playing certain kinds of games that differ from the games that are not actually gamey, that are not fully game-like in the extended body, the generalized collectives of our kind of animal here on Earth. There's obviously something much better that collectivity, the natural collectivity of humans, is for than what has been being done with it. Let's find out all those things together, today and in the future.